I'm just late to the game here.
No.
Oh, you
As long as you're there, that's fine.
Wait, I'm saying join, but nothing's happening. Let's see.
You just need to
Oh, there
start,
we go. There we
start
go.
your video.
we hear you.
And Joanne, if you can start yours as well, your video down at the bottom would be.
Oh, that would help, wouldn't it?
Yeah, there we go. Perfect. Hello.
Good
Great.
morning.
We got every
Morning.
morning. How's everyone's week going?
Good.
Good. So let's dive in. We were talking about if you remember, we went the opposite of what we were doing two classes ago, which was very fast shutter speeds, those splash. I was going to say that I should have said this last time, but as the weather obviously is going to improve over the next couple of weeks, it's going to get warmer, like we're going to have more sunshine, like feel free to still practice that fast shutter speed setup with the lemon dropping into the vase, the apple, the strawberries, whatever it may be, because you're only going to find it easier. I kind of gave you the hardest challenge at the beginning because it was dim light. Like you had to push up your ISOs very high. You maybe had to bring in another like flash or like special like flashlight or to basically illuminate and cheat the camera to think that it was brighter than it really is. But just because the assignment like is finished for me, please still go out and practice it. And I think that's a really good, fun activity when it's nice outside to be able to do it with greater ease. And you'll be able to get your shutter speeds much faster. Some of you actually on your cameras have the ability to be able to go, I think, all the way up to 1/8,000th of a second. Some of you may have. Most cameras cap out at 1/4,000. But depending on what camera you have, it may actually not be there by default, but if you go into, you can take your shutter speed and take it all the way up and it will stop at 1/4,000, maybe. But most of you have pretty high-end cameras. And if you go into the settings and you go into the shooting menu, whether you're on a Canon, a Nikon, a Sony, it doesn't matter. There's going to be something there that says extended shutter speed or increased shutter speed. The verbiage changes depending on who you're working with. But essentially, if you turn that on, you unleash the capability for the camera to be able to shoot at an insanely fast shutter speed, which most of the time you just don't need and it's not there by default. But something like that, even if you went to like a body of water and you shot with 1/8,000 or even 1/4,000, you're going to get really, really interesting pictures because you're going to freeze motion that we can't even see. So for example, let's say you were looking at reflections, like Susie's picture behind her of like trees with reflections. If you just honed in on just the reflections, you're going to see like lines and ripples in the water that we don't usually see. Not don't usually see. In fact, we can't see because we compute as humans at about 1/100th of a second. That's kind of how we see the world. Like we don't see a hummingbird frozen still, but we also don't see like motion, like which we'll look at the slow shutter speeds that you guys sent in a minute. Hey, Mary. So yeah, point being, just because I set an assignment and the week elapses, feel free to still, if that's something that kind of tickled your fancy and you really enjoyed it, go back, send me the photos. I'd love to see them. And that one especially, I know really requires good ambient light. And that's only going to get better as we move like through spring and into summer.
You're not in Seattle though. It's raining and cloudy.
Well, I've just moved to Florida. So it's like 87
Oh,
degrees here today.
oh, you
Uh,
did?
yeah, I moved. Yeah, I moved last Wednesday.
Oh
Uh,
my God.
Why did you move to Florida?
yeah. Oh my God, honestly, when I told everyone in California, like they look at me like I'm an alien. Like, are you
No
okay?
wonder.
Because I have two little girls, and all of our family and our support network is in the UK. And just California, we absolutely loved, but it was just too far away from home for us. And my wife was just like, after living in California, I'm not doing anywhere with a winter. So which didn't leave us many places. So we've moved. We've moved to Florida, which is a huge change from where we were.
Oh,
Um,
Where? Where in Florida? There's a big, that's a,
a place called Delray Beach. So it's about 40 minutes north of Miami.
uh,
oh.
So it's like in between Palm Beach and Miami. on
Oh
the
boy.
yeah. Oh my God, it's a real. We're not going to talk politics in this class, and I
No.
be apolitical. I am not official. I have a green card, but I'm not a US citizen. So the only thing I can't do is vote. So I never talk about politics. But honestly, when my neighbors were like, "You're moving to Florida," and then it's funny when you're in Florida and you say you're from California, they also look at you like you're from the moon.
Yes.
Everyone
You
here, like
just,
I met all my new neighbors here, and I'm like, I've come from California. They said, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah."
you just need a big box of Band-Aids to put over your mouth.
Yeah, I know. Um, it's interesting, but yeah. So yes, it's very nice weather here, but it's only going to get nicer. Is what is it may be raining today, but there will be lots of opportunities for you to get out and practice shooting at those faster shutter speeds, and exactly how slow shutter speeds, which we'll look at in a minute, show us things that we don't see. The same is true for fast shutter speeds, and most people only think of fast shutter speeds when they think of a fast thing that's moving. I've got to freeze it, a hummingbird. And actually, there's lots of other uses of fast shutter speeds, that things that aren't moving that quickly, but that they're moving. And you can create interesting abstractions of them when it comes to patterns and lines and shapes, because you are showing things that we don't see. And when you show things that we don't see with a camera, instantly you make people ask questions when they look at your photos. You instantly elevate them, you make them more interesting. It's not sometimes immediately apparent what you photographed. And all of that helps to elevate your photography. Whereas if you just took a picture or a reflection at 1/125, it's going to look exactly as our eye sees. It's just going to, I mean, same true. I'm just looking at Susie, happens to be big on my screen at the moment. But if you take pictures of clouds, try taking a picture of some clouds with a very, very fast shutter speed. And they're going to look totally different to what you see with your eyes, because the clouds are moving and you're going to see so much patterning and texture and line in there, especially if you've got nice wispy clouds like Susie's got in her background. So the problem though with fast shutter speeds is, Charlie, do fast shutter speeds let in much light or not much light?
I'm sorry, I was writing. What did you say?
You're okay. Sorry to call on you. Fast shutter speeds, do they let in a lot of light or not much light?
Not much light.
Yeah, exactly. It's so quick. It's like opening and closing those curtains really fast. So we do have to lean on ISO or aperture when it comes to getting your photograph well exposed when you're using these very fast shutter speeds, even if it's sunny outside. Even if it's really sunny outside, if you get up to the 1/4000s, 1/5000s, 1/6000s, 1/8000s, your ISO is going to have to go to 600, 800, 1000. But that's okay. I don't. Hold on, Susie, one sec. Because you can get rid of the noise afterwards in Lightroom. I can show you how to do that. I may reinforce that and just go over that again. And B, you cannot recreate capturing that movement at that fast shutter speed. But you can bring back sharpness. For example, if you had to go down to a low F number, you can reduce the noise if you had to go to a higher ISO. And again, most of your cameras, you've all got great cameras. Like, a lot of people kind of get stuck in the mindset where, like, I have to keep it at ISO 100, ISO 100, ISO 100, because they've shot with film, they've shot with old digital cameras from 20 years ago, where if you went above about ISO 800, your picture was a disaster. With most modern day cameras, especially if you've got a mirrorless camera, you can get to somewhere between 2000 and 5000. You'll see noise, but once you put it through Lightroom, it's going to look like you photographed it at ISO 100. Because noise lives on, if you imagine my two hands here, these are the pixels. Noise lives on the edges of a pixel. So noise lives, it kind of clings onto the edge of the pixel. And when we get, which is why you see all the dots, when we get rid of it, essentially what we're doing is we're like sanding away the edges of the pixels to remove the noise. Now, Nancy, what do you think that does to the picture if we put lots of noise reduction on it? What does it do to
Sharpens it.
Did you say sharpens it?
Yes.
Other way.
No.
Yeah, it makes it less sharp, because we're taking our pixel and we're like sanding it down.
Oh, okay.
And what we really want is a nice hard round pixel. We don't want like one that's like irregular and has been sanded down. So you'll see in fact, let me share my screen. I'll show you this. Let me find a picture that I can practice on. Let's see if we've got you all sent me JPEGs. So I need a raw file. Let me show you. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture of my daughters. So, because that's just what happens to come up. So look at this. Let me share my screen. Okay, so you'll be able to see this now. So here's my family photograph. Okay,
Oh,
over here at develop. Okay, when you come and you have to do this on a raw file, which is why I just quickly pulled this up, is you will see that noise and sharpening live next to each other. Now, this picture was not taken at a particularly high ISO, you can see 400, but I have two options when it comes to noise reduction. And this is really relevant if you're using a very fast shutter speed. In fact, I'll probably be able to find a picture of my daughter here, like with a really fast shutter speed. Let's just see if I got one of her. Let's see if I got something like, okay, so let's see this. Here we go. Okay, so that's
cute.
that's relatively fast, but not that fast. 1/800. So you can see I could keep my ISO pretty low there. But if it was a noisy picture, the way to do it is if you come down here under detail, you'll see that sharpening and noise reduction live next to each other in the, I'll make this bigger so you can see it, in the develop module. And they live next to each other because by their very nature, it's kind of like a set of weighing scales. You have noise reduction over here, and you have sharpening over here, and it's kind of like a set of weighing scales. And what happens is if we add a lot of noise reduction, it's kind of like a seesaw, we get less sharpening. The photograph becomes, we have to do something, and this is why they live next to each other, because I'm going to show you how to balance them. On the flip side, if you over sharpen a picture, you get less noise reduction and you get more noise. So I'll show you. If I over sharpen this picture, I'll just go crazy with it and over sharpen it. Okay, look at my daughter's skin. That's over sharpening. That's noise. That's because I've over sharpened it. Look, if I take it away, it goes back. So we've got to be careful because a common thing is people get really excited with the sharpening slider and they slide it and they don't realize that bringing sharpening into your picture creates noise. And you'll see the same thing if I do the noise reduction. I'll go over this in a minute, what these actually do. But if I do the noise reduction, look at my daughter's skin. Watch. Getting less sharp. Hopefully you can all see that. You're like losing some of the texture out of her skin when I do the noise reduction. And that's because I'm sanding the edges of the pixels. Now we're looking at this like at 200%, which is why she doesn't look sharp. But hopefully you can see that there's noise, there's less sharpening. So we have to do this like delicate balancing act. The easiest way to do it, to reduce noise in a picture, is we have this button here called denoise that you can only see if you're working on a raw file. It doesn't show you on a JPEG, so I can't show you on any of the pictures you sent me because none of them were raw files. But what this does is it actually does something different to what I said. So traditional noise reduction sands down the edges of a pixel. Okay. What this does, the denoise button, is it uses AI and it takes out the noisy pixels from your picture and it replaces them with nice clean pixels. And this is the one I would want you to use. And I just, I didn't know I was going to talk about this, so I didn't have a picture plan, but for time, I haven't got an eye. But imagine you had a picture that you'd taken somewhere between ISO 2000 and 5000, which you may need to do if you get up to the really fast shutter speeds. In those instances, I want you to come down here and I want you to do this first. The very first thing you do to your picture before you do any other type of editing. And you're going to left click on this denoise button. And that's going to open a window. Show of hands, have any of you used this before?
No.
Okay, so like A couple of you, but not many of you. Okay, so what this is going to do is this is going to straight away open this box called the enhanced preview box. And you're going to have, by default, denoise checked. If I uncheck it, then, or it may look like this if you've never opened it before. So you have these three things that you can do. You can do denoise, you can do this thing called raw details, and you can do this thing called super resolution. I'll explain what the other two are in a minute. But for a high ISO picture, which for most of you, I would put in the band of anywhere above 2000, which really you only have to get to if you use very, very fast shutter speeds or you're photographing inside and it's dark. Just say you went to I don't know, you walked into a church and you were on vacation and you walked into Notre Dame and you wanted to take some pictures and you can't use a tripod in there. It's going to be very, very dark. And you're going to have to push up your ISO to cheat the camera that it's brighter than it really is. Remember, the easiest way to think about ISO, think about like inside your camera is a light dimmer switch that you can turn up and down. I find it's the easiest analogy to understand ISO. Low ISOs, we have the light dimmer switch turned down. High ISOs, we're just turning up the dimmer switch inside our camera to cheat it or to trick it so that it thinks it's brighter than it really is. Those are the two main scenarios where you have to use a high ISO, fast shutter speeds, and when you have very poor light, ambient light. But what's great with technology is if I was teaching you 4 years ago, even 3 years ago, I'd say none of you can push your cameras more than ISO 2000. That's the cap. You're not going to get a workable picture. As AI has infiltrated into photo editing software, notably Lightroom and Photoshop, we now have the ability where if we use this denoise, it's going to say, you can see it says enhance uses AI to improve image quality. The result will be saved as a new DNG. Anyone remember what DNG stands for?
Digital.
Yeah.
Digital negative.
Right. Yeah. Digital negative. It's just a DNG is a computer generated raw file. So rather than your camera generator, and like I have a Nikon, so you can see it says .nef. For those of you with Canons, it's going to say .cr2. For those of you with Sony's, it's going to say .aw or AI7. Like you're going to get different numbers. Depends on the manufacturer. But here, as I slide this, I can move this window around. So I can, and again, I should really find a noisy. In fact, let me make this noisy and then denoise it, which may not work here, but hopefully it does. Let's see. No, it's going to make it look super weird. Okay, I'm not going to do that. So come down here. Oops. You come down here, you go to, sorry, go away. There we go. Okay, there we go. So come down to the bottom, you click on denoise, and you're going to get this slider. For high ISO images, Adobe's recommendation is to put this slider somewhere between 60 and 80. And that's not saying it's always perfect, but that would be the guideline I would go for. Remember, if we do too much noise reduction, she's going to look like she's made out of plasticine. She's going to, all her edges is going to look like she's made out of Play-Doh. But at the same time, we want to get rid of the noise. So for this is not a high ISO picture, so I'm just going to put it at 60. And if you hover around here, you will see the noise disappear. It's giving you a preview of what it looks like. This tool is like, when this came out, this is like revolutionary. It's mind-blowing for a photographer like me who's been doing this for 24 years in terms of suddenly it opened up so many creative possibilities because you could have a really bad camera. You could have an $100 camera that at ISO 600 is a disaster. And you can rescue the images using this. So if I hit enhance, you'll see on the top left, it's going to say creating DNG using denoise up here. You can all see that. It takes a second. And what you're going to see is when this churns out, you can see the file name here says untitled 9607.nef. Okay. In a minute, it's going to create a second file. It's like a brand new photograph, but theoretically has no noise in it, but it is still a .dng, which means that I can do everything I want to do on it. There we go. It's going to come up now. There we go. So the file extension is always going to be the same file name. Then it's going to say dash, and it's kind of hard to see against the white background. I'll see if I can put it up there somewhere. Dash enhanced dash NR, which means noise reduction, .dng. So if I went back to my grid, I'm now going to have to put it down here. But I'm going to have two versions of that photograph. I'm going to have the original raw that I took, and now I'm going to have the DNG. The beauty of this is I can do whatever I want to do on this. I don't know, let's say I wanted to like brighten up her face. And I've got all the information that I need. In fact, I've got more because it's thrown in nice clean pixels where I don't have to be so concerned about the noise. And you'll see now if I go down to that denoise button, it will be grayed out. It doesn't let you do this more than once. So you can't denoise it and then denoise it again. So you can see it says denoise has already been applied to this photo. You'll see it also grayed out. Like if I go to one of your pictures and I go to denoise it, it's grayed out. And it says denoise is not currently compatible with this photo format. That's because this is a JPEG. So don't freak out if you see that. It's not your Lightroom gone wrong. It's just at the moment you can only use this tool on a JPEG. Okay. When I went to that denoise button, you saw that a number of other things also came up as options. And while we're here, I want to just show you what those are. Let me just find that same picture of my daughter. There she is. So if I come back here and I go back to denoise over here, you can see the button is now illuminated because I'm back on the raw file. But there's actually two ways of getting here. You can get here with this, but the denoise is part of a wider set of tools that Adobe calls the enhance features. As in, I'm going to enhance the photo, ENHANCE, of which denoise is one. And you saw when the file churned out, it's a dash enhanced dash NR noise reduction .dng. I can also get to that place, that window, without hitting the denoise button. If I right click on the picture, you'll see about a third of the way down, it says enhance. And if I click on this, it's going to take me to the same window. Because there's three different things you can do here. I'm going to come back to the noise reduction in a minute. I just want to show you all of this just while we're in this window, so it makes all sense. Default, you can only choose one of these three options at the time. At the moment, I've got denoise checked, which means I can't check on these other two. If I uncheck denoise, I then have the option to click on either this thing called raw details or this thing called super resolution. I was going to see if that showed you. The other main reason that we would come here is a lot, and this again is like a huge thing for advancements in photography. Let's just say you've taken this picture on your iPhone. Okay, I'm just going to make something up. You took it on your iPhone and your iPhone had 20 megapixels. Okay. And you were like, I want to blow this up and I want to make an 18 by 24 inch print of it. The iPhone is not going to be big enough. The physical picture that the iPhone took is not big enough for you to get the really good quality when you go. And even with your cameras, like the minute you go above about an 18 by 24 print, which doesn't often happen for GCA. They won't ask for something that big, but maybe you want to print something big and put it on your wall. You need a bigger file. You need more megapixels. The same is true as if you're photographing some wildlife or a friend or a dog or grandkids, and they're miles away in the distance, and you only want to crop a certain part of the picture. Because let's just imagine this is 20 megapixels, the whole thing, but I only take 25% of the picture. This picture of my daughter then becomes a 5 megapixel image. That's like iPhone 2. Like I'm not going to be able, you'll see I mean, my camera's got a lot of megapixels, but she's going to look a little bit blurry. She doesn't look sharp, right? She looks pixelated. And that's because we call it, it's not terrible, but I've pixel pushed, especially, I'll really overdo it. I'm just going, all right. Okay, that's not clear. So another tool that lives within this enhance feature, you can write it down, is called super resolution. And what the super resolution does is essentially, if we go to library here and we look at the actual size of the file, which will be here. So you can see in my red circle here, you can see it says 8256 by 5504. That's pixels. That's saying one edge is 8,256, one edge is 5,504. When I crop, which I've already done on this picture, but if I crop more, you'll see that number when I come back to it, that will have decreased. Look at where it says cropped. You see, so that's showing me the original, it doesn't change. And then it's showing me when I cropped it, it's gone smaller. When I do super, I'll go back to the original of this picture. When I do super resolution, actually I'll go from where I was before, come back. There we go. My daughter is obsessed with unicorns, hence the unicorn headband. She's so if, come on, load up. Let's come out, go back in. What I'm doing when I use the super resolution is I am doubling the height of my picture. I'm doubling the width of my picture, the physical size of it. And what that does is that quadruples the amount of megapixels. So
And the only way you can access that is through edit in enhance.
Absolutely, yeah. That's not on the side here like the denoise one. You have to right click and hit enhance. I'm going to show it to you now. I'm going to do it. The big advantage of that is suddenly this goes from being a 20 megabit, and you don't need to do this on every picture, but this goes from being a 20 megapixel picture to an 80 megapixel picture. Which and then I'm like, I only want to take 25%. I'm still left with a 20 megapixel picture, which is great and perfect for the print that I want to do. Another reason people are having a lot of fun with this tool if they're going back to older photos. So they're going back to photos that you can do on a JPEG. I could do this on any of your pictures. In fact, if I came to one of your pictures, let's just find one, like a picture here. You can see if I go enhance, the denoise one is unselected, but I can do the super resolution. And what's really cool about this is you can take your old JPEG photos and you can make them into big raw photos that then you can work on. So maybe 10 years ago when your camera was not as sophisticated as it was now, but you have a great picture from a trip you took in Italy, and you're like, I'd love to work on this because I think this would be great for this contest or this show or this magazine or for whatever you're using the photo for. I want you to enhance it, and I would highly recommend enhancing it first before you do anything else, and then you work on the bigger file. And this uses AI as well. It's really crazy how this works, actually. The theory behind it is the Lightroom looks at, why is my bar being funny? Stop my share for a sec. Lightroom look at every pixel. You see Lightroom again?
Yes.
Okay, great. So imagine you have, imagine you have a pixel and a pixel and a pixel, and you have hundreds of these in your photo. Lightroom looks at each pixel and it draws, or doesn't draw, it creates new pixels around the existing pixels. It will add with AI 4 times the amount of pixels. It will draw in extra pixels that were never there to begin with, which makes generally the more pixels we have in an image, the more dynamic range you have. As a reminder, dynamic range is how much light we're seeing. When we see more light, when we see more dynamic range, we have more color, more contrast, more clarity, more definition, because we're packing more what we call pixels per inch, which is like if I took a little square and this was 1 inch and this was 1 inch, is how many pixels can I cram into my little square? And the more pixels that I can cram in, the clearer my photo is going to be, but also the ability to be able to crop with it, print it large, play with it becomes much greater.
Can I just ask you something?
Yeah, of course.
You said that you can make old photos into, what was it? A JPEG?
Into a
RAW?
raw. So imagine we took this photo 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
If I right click on it and I go to enhance,
Yeah.
and I choose the super resolution and I hit enhance, it's going to churn out another version of this photograph. You'll see it in a minute. And it's going to call it, unlike the last one where we did noise reduction, this time it's going to say untitled dash enhanced, there it is, dash SR. That means super resolution. So it's a clue. It's telling you what you've done. .dng. So to that end, Charlie, what that's essentially doing is you now have 2 versions of the same photograph, but one is a JPEG and one is a RAW. And if we look at that, you can actually see it's kind of interesting. Look at the size of this one, 6126 by 35404. You see on over there? If I go and look at the other version, it's double, 12,000 by 6,000. So I've doubled the number of pixels. I know I've doubled the width and the height, which means because it's 2 by 2, I've quadrupled the amount of megapixels. So this suddenly, and it's all using AI, this suddenly opened up an enormous opportunity for people to be able to go back to old photographs that they thought they couldn't use and essentially upgrade them to make them look like they were taken on a camera yesterday.
Wow.
And in fact, even better than that, because most of you do not have a camera that takes 80 megapixel pictures or 100 megapixel pictures. You have 25 megapixels, 20 megapixels. So suddenly by blowing this up, we have the ability to then be able to go in and see detail and work on things that I just can't do on a RAW file, on a JPEG file. So the 2 main uses for this super resolution tool are, one, when you want to aggressively crop on a picture. Let me just get back to the class here. When you want to aggressively crop on a picture. So if I was like I love these rowers. This is a great shot, by the way. We'll talk about it in a minute. But I need to go like that because that's the picture I want. Before you do that, I want you to enhance it with the super resolution. Because then you're going to get 4 times as many pixels, which means when you crop it in, you don't lose as much. The second main reason is if you want to blow up a picture big. And I would say for big, for any of your cameras, would be bigger than maybe bigger than an 11 by 14. If you want to go by, if you're like, I really like this picture and I want to put it on my wall, I want to give it to a friend, I would enhance it before you export it.
Even if it's not a JPEG.
Even if it's a RAW, because
Okay.
because you're like Susie, your raw camera may have 25 megapixels, but if I can give it 100 megapixels, that's only the only downside, because lots of people I show this to and they're like, why don't I just enhance everything? Which you can do. You can take a whole, imagine here, I can take all of these pictures. And if I go down to enhance, it's going to say, it's going to do all of them, batch enhance. And look, it's only going to take 20 seconds, but it says down here, enhance 17 images.
Jeez,
So this is cool. You don't have to go through each one individually.
that's amazing.
Yeah. The downside of doing that
Yeah.
is it
Yeah.
takes up space on your computer.
Mhm.
So I always say you don't need to do this on every picture, but I would recommend it for those three use cases. One, where you need to aggressively crop. Two, where you need to print it out big. And three, where it's an old photo that you took as a JPEG and you want to make it a RAW, a DNG, a digital negative. Those are the three main reasons that I would use this tool. But I wouldn't.
Adam, I have a question.
Hey, go for it.
I can photograph a slide, which
Yeah.
puts it then in my digital camera.
Yeah,
But did you say then it would enhance it, would make it sharper?
absolutely. Yeah, because you're going to
Okay.
have pixels. It's no different if
Okay.
you're photographing a slide, Nancy, to if you're photographing like a landscape, all the same. Your camera has a cap on how many pixels it can capture. What we're doing here, there's a type of camera called a medium format camera that you may have heard of. People have them. They're very expensive and they're heavy. And medium format cameras are very popular with high-end professional photographers because they capture so much detail. They'll capture like 150 megapixels, 200 megapixels, but they're like, some of them can be like 20, 30, $40,000 for a camera. So the majority of people don't have them and they're heavy and they're not cumbersome. The cool thing about this tool is you can get to that with your mirrorless camera, with your DSLR. You can even do it with an iPhone. You can take one of your old iPhone pictures that was 10 megapixels and suddenly it becomes 40 megapixels, which is amazing. So this was a real revolutionary tool when it came out. I wish they made it more obvious. They kind of hide it away. But it's there. It's right click and it's enhance. Now,
Adam,
go for it, Susie.
well, I have two questions, but one, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole. I just want the quick, simple answer. When
Yeah.
you talked about, the negative is it takes up a lot of space on your computer.
Mhm.
So this could be a whole talk, but does that begs the question, should we be backing up with another way other than like a time machine? Should
That
we
is
be?
going that you're right. That is an entire lesson in itself. The short answer is yes,
Yes, okay.
absolutely. Because and again, I'm not going to go down it, but when you do
Yeah.
too much, but if you let's say you do your time machine backup and you do it on your drive, and this is your drive that you've got
Yes.
your backup on. What happens if you spill a cup of coffee on that? What happens if there's a flood in your house? Like what happens if, God forbid, there's a fire? Like and I've seen people when they have all that and they're like, oh, I'm all nicely organized and I have my time machine backup, and then they spill a bottle of Gatorade over the whole thing. They're screwed.
Okay.
There is a whole protocol that I recommend when it comes to backing up. If there's an appetite for that in this group, we can definitely run a session on like post-production workflow and digital file management.
I would love that, but
But I'm not
I
going to
don't
do. But I'm
think-
not going to. But I'm not going to do that today.
Yeah. And
Because
then my other quick question is, does it make sense? You talked about in the beginning there about, when you're shooting in manual and you're adjusting your ISO, et cetera. Does it make sense to, like, sometimes what I'll do is I'll put it in aperture priority and
Yeah.
see what the settings are. And then I'll put it in manual and do what they say, but maybe do my own adjustments. I mean, is that
Yeah, that's a great way to do it.
okay? All right.
Because you're relying on the camera a little bit. You're leaning into the technology. But even with the technology, you've heard me say this before, that the best camera is the 2 inches behind it. It's you. So the camera will give you a clue, say, hey, I think the shutter speed should be this, or hey, and you could do it the other way as well, Susie. You could put it on shutter speed priority and see what it tells you it thinks the F number should be. But all the camera is doing in that instance is trying to get you a picture that's the correct brightness. It has no idea what you're taking a picture of. Whether you're taking a picture where you want a very shallow depth of field or a very large depth of field, or whether you're trying to freeze movement or show movement. So that's where you have to take it, because you may be photographing a landscape and it may come out and say, oh yeah, I think this should be 2.8 because it's really dark. But that's no good if you're photographing a landscape and you want a large depth of field. So then I would flick to manual, up the F number, and if I needed to, increase the ISO.
Okay.
I still don't want you all shooting at really high ISOs the whole time. The general rule of thumb is to keep them as low as possible. I just don't want you to be, lots of people are very scared of pushing the ISO. And what I'm trying to show you through these tools is that you have a little bit more leeway than you probably think, which lets you do more with shutter speed and aperture, which ultimately are the things that create your photograph in terms of how it visually looks, not the exposure. That makes sense?
Thanks.
Okay. So to come back to this, let's just enhance this picture, okay? So we'll just enhance this one and we'll do a super resolution on it. Oops, I don't want to do it on 17. Let me uncheck them all. Okay, so I'll just right click, enhance, super resolution, hit enhance. It's super quick. And then right next to it, you're going to see it's going to put the new one once it's finished. So you're going to have to, there we go. So you've got two versions. The old one, the JPEG, and the new one. So if you imagine this could be that, I think this is Nancy's photo. Nancy went out and by accident, she took it as a JPEG. Or it's a 10-year-old photograph that was taken as a JPEG. Now we have a raw version of the file, which means when we go in, we just have a lot more detail. When we start playing with it, it's not going to be, when you edit a JPEG, it's something called destructive editing. It's like scratching away at the photograph, damaging it every time you do an edit. When you work on a raw, it works totally over the top. It's non-destructive editing, so you don't damage the file. Now, interestingly, let's just imagine, I'm just making this up, but let's just imagine that Nancy had taken this picture at ISO 2000. Because it was really dark and she was hand-holding the camera and she wanted to capture all these reeds blowing in the wind. One thing that you can't do that throws people is at the moment, I think it will come out in the next 6 months to a year, but at the moment, you cannot use the super resolution and the denoise button on a picture. So you can see I've already done the super resolution here. And if I go to denoise, it's not going to let me do it. If I go the other way to denoise, right click and enhance, it's going to be frozen out. I can't do it. So you have to make a choice about which one, and same the other way. If I did the denoise, I can't do the super resolution. So you have to make a choice about which one you want to do. If it's my rule of thumb and my recommendation is if it is a high ISO image, anywhere between 2000 and 5000 or higher, I would use the denoise first and not worry so much about the super resolution. But then the question comes, which inevitably people always ask me, they're like, Adam, I photograph something at ISO 5000, but I also want to blow it up and make it big. How do I do that? The hack around that is the first thing you do is you enhance with the super resolution. So you enhance with the SR, make it bigger. We add pixels that were never there. We let Lightroom put them in. The reason being is even though that loses the denoise button, noise we can get rid of manually. Until a year ago, this denoise button never existed. The only way to get rid of noise in a photograph was hit, which still exists. So what you can do is you can blow your photograph up huge, make it bigger. Look at the difference in the file size. Look between these two. So you can see this one is 7200 by 4800. The other one's going to be half that there, 3600 by 2400. Double the size. double the height, double the width, times 4 the megapixels. Okay. But what you can do then is then you can, and this is again not the perfect photo to show you on because it's just not a noisy picture to begin with, but I'll still explain it, is noise tends to live in a photo in two places. Noise lives in the shadows. See it here? That's noise. I'm super zoomed in. But noise lives in the shadows. It lives everywhere, but you see it more in the shadows. You can see all the noise here. And it lives in solid blocks of color. If you have a bright blue sky, or if you take a picture of someone and they're wearing a bright red shirt and your ISO is really high, you're going to see it in those, I'll go over to this purple, in those swathes of color. That's where it's most noticeable. Hopefully you can all see it there. Lightroom knows that and gives you two ways to reduce the noise depending on where you're seeing it being most prominent in your picture. 90% of the time, it's usually that you want to get rid of it in the shadows. It gets rid of it across the whole photo, but primarily in the shadows. And over here, if you look at these sliders under noise, you can see it says manual noise reduction. So remember, we've blown this picture up massive. And now we want to get rid of some of the noise, but we don't have the option to hit the denoise button. If I slide this luminance slider, hopefully you can see this. I'll zoom a bit more in so you can really see it. Okay, there's the noise. I slide the luminance button, it's going to disappear. Before, after. You'll see the difference there?
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm having to go really in on this photo because it wasn't, but every photo has noise in it, even if you take it at ISO 100. It's just more emphasized the higher end ISO you go. General rule of thumb that Adobe recommends, I'm going to give you some numbers here, is for a high ISO picture where noise is prominent, they recommend sliding this luminance slider somewhere between 40 and 60. I can see you all scribbling your notes. I'm just going to give you guys a second to write it all down. The reason we don't go higher than that, Mary, you weren't here at the beginning actually, so it's not fair of me to ask you that question. I'll ask you a question in a minute. Nancy, why would I not push the noise reduction more? What does too much noise reduction do to my photo?
Becomes grainy again, pixely.
Yeah, it becomes less sharp. Remember the seesaw? More noise reduction, less sharpness. Too much sharpening, more noise. We've got to equal it out. So if this was a picture of, and all of these are not sharp pictures, but if this was a picture of, I don't know, yeah, I can kind of use this one. Is it's going to end up where the whole thing is going to look like it's like, I always say it looks like it's made of plasticine. It just looks a bit weird because you lose all the definition around the edges. So rule of thumb, 40 to 60. Don't push it any higher. Sometimes you need less than that. By the way, another nice tool that you have at your disposal is if you click up here, under detail, there's like a little square with some lines coming out of it. If I left click on that and imagine I was just looking at the photo like this, I can hover over any part of the photo. You can see it changing as I move, and I can find a point that had noise and I can click on it. Now what happens is when I'm reducing the noise, it's kind of hard to see there, but hopefully you can see there's lots of noise in that square at the moment. And when I lift it up, the noise disappears. So it kind of gives you a microscopic view. Personally, I just zoom in. I'd rather just zoom in. I think it's easier. So I zoom into an area and I make sure I've got rid of the noise. And you can see between like 40 and 60 is a really comfortable spot there to get rid of that. Make sense to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
So
So,
just go on, Nancy.
in this, it's actually, when you have it on luminance, it's not changing the color. It's only either adding or taking away the noisiness.
It's doing
graininess.
absolutely nothing to your exposure. It's doing nothing to the color. It's doing nothing to the white balance. It's just reducing the noise. But by reducing the noise, what you're actually doing is seeing more dynamic range. So your photo is going to appear a little bit brighter. It's going to appear a little bit more vivid. It's going to appear a little bit more sharper because we've got rid of all the pixels. Sorry, we've got rid of all the noise that's living on the edge of the pixels that's making our photo look less bright, less colorful, less sharp.
Okay.
We're not physically changing any of those things, exposure, color, white balance, whatever it may be. But what we're doing is just like, it's kind of like, let's say you had a wall and you wanted to paint a wall in your bedroom. If you sanded down the wall, you're not actually changing the color. You're not getting out a new paintbrush and painting a different color. But if you sand it down, the bit which you sand it down is going to look different to the rest of your wall. You haven't actively taken a brighter paintbrush or a darker paintbrush. You've just used a tool that has the byproduct of changing the color or lightening or darkening it. You can think of this as the same thing. Hopefully that's a good metaphor to help understand it. So it's not changing anything in our picture other than the amount of noise. Anyone else got any questions on that? And if we just did the denoise button, I don't have to do this. I'm just showing you the situation that's going to come up inevitably for all of you, where you're going to want to blow something up big, and then you're going to want to get rid of the noise as well. Underneath luminance, you have detail and contrast. For photos that are very detailed, and for that, I would say it's like people's faces and like pets and like anything that has like lots of lines. This is not that detailed, this picture. By default, Lightroom puts this on 50. You can play with this slider a little bit. The problem is the more you put it up, you're basically saying, try to get back the detail for me that may have been lost by me sanding away those pixels. Again, you're going to make the picture less sharp. So I generally recommend that we just leave this alone. We don't touch it. Just keep it on 50, which is what it will be on by default. And same with contrast, because contrast is just going to put contrast into your picture. But I've got much better ways of putting contrast into my picture by like using a tone curve, for example, which you all know. I should have zoomed out and done that. Let me just show you. By putting contrast into the picture, like that's adding contrast. Before, after. Before, after. As a reminder, the way I'm seeing the before and after is underneath your delete key on your keyboard. You have the slash. When you're in develop, if you hit that, it will show you the original picture, and then it will show you the new one. And you can actually see on the top right-hand corner, right up here, when it says before. And then when I hit the slash again, it disappears. And I hit it again, before. And this is great whenever we're editing any photos in Lightroom. It's a really good tool to be able to flick before and after. To see whether we've overdone it or whether we've got more that needs to come. So to come back to the noise reduction down at the bottom, that deals with when I have noise primarily in the shadows. What happens if I've got a big bright blue sky, one solid block of color where the noise is really evident? In that case, Lightroom gives you the option to be able to use this color slider. Now, this isn't really one swathe. As you can see, this is not having nearly as dramatic effect on the noise as the luminance slider. Look at the difference. That's the luminance. I'll go really far in so you can see. Pick a nice spot with lots of noise. That's the luminance. This is the color one. Because the color one really only works when you have, and I don't want to have to hunt around to find a photo, I can just tell you, it only works when you have like a big swathe of one color in your picture. And usually for most people, that's a big blue sky that they've shot with a high ISO. Then I would, and again, the recommendation is between 40 and 60. It's not going to do much to this picture because there's not one swathe of color. It like algorithmically on the back end, it tries to look for one very specific hue, and then it just removes the noise from that hue. So here on this picture, we would use the luminance slider. Let's put it at 50. So what we've done here is we've combined two tools. We've used the enhance feature to make it bigger, the super resolution, which means if Nancy wanted to crop on it or she wanted to blow it up and put it on her wall, she now has the capability to do that. And then we've coupled that with manual noise reduction, rather than the first thing I showed you, which was the denoise button, because we can't use both on the same photo. So don't be freaked out if suddenly you see this disappear. Now, I reckon within this has been out for about 9 months, these tools. So they're relatively new. But I reckon within 6 months to a year, you'll be able to do both on a photograph. They just haven't got there yet. So this may not what I'm teaching you now in a year's time will still be relevant, but it just will be nice that you'll be able to hopefully click on super resolution and then say, I also want to get rid of the noise and hit on the denoise button. Okay, that makes sense to everyone. Good. So, Joanne, what happens when I apply noise reduction to the sharpness of my photograph?
Say that again, I'm sorry.
What happens when I apply noise reduction to my photo to the sharpness? Does it get sharper or does it get less sharp? And I put noise reduction on it, which is what I've done here. "50-50, you can't go wrong.
I was writing so fast, now I have to think about it.
Don't worry. So let's think about my weight. Think about the weighing scales again. Here's noise reduction. Here's sharpness. What happens if I'm on the seesaw and this goes up? What happens to sharpening?
The other goes down.
The other goes down. So we get less sharp. We get a less sharp picture. So noise reduction. Remember, and you can think about if you want to remember the analogy of sanding away at the pixels, because I've sanded away at the pixels, I've inherently made my picture less sharp. So after we do this, and we always do noise reduction first, it is of paramount importance to then come up and sharpen your picture.
Oh,
And that's why they live right next to each other. And I wish it was the other way around. It would make far more logical sense for this to be on top of here, because you always do noise reduction first, and then you do sharpening. They've put it the wrong way around, and there's no way to switch them, unfortunately. Again, that's a product request that me and other photographers have asked Adobe to do, because I think it makes more sense. But when it comes to sharpening, because we are now dealing with a raw file, no raw file is sharp. When you take a picture and you take a raw photograph and it comes from your camera, inherently it has no sharpness on it. The edges are not completely sharp. And that's intentional. That's because a raw photo is like a raw piece of meat. It's like uncooked. It's a blank canvas that we can work on without causing damage to the file. If you take a JPEG, it's the total opposite. If you take a picture on your phone and it's a JPEG, it bakes in the sharpness, it bakes in the color, it bakes in the contrast. It's all like glued to the file, to the photo, and it's very hard for you to peel it away and work on it. A RAW is the opposite. A RAW, it takes the picture, but everything that you can do to the photo is over here. It's not stuck to it. But we have to remember that one of those things is sharpening. So any RAW file, whether it's a DNG like this or just a photo from your camera, before you export it, for me, for a show, for your own personal pleasure, we should always sharpen the picture. And this is easy. I'm going to show you how to do it. It's super simple. And I'm actually going to find a picture that of course, these are all slow shutter speed, so it's hard for me to find something that's sharp. Yeah, let's take this one. Take this one. Okay. So again, you have the little preview window up here that you can click on a picture and I can find an edge and I can click, or you can just, I'm on a laptop, so I can zoom in by pinching, but you can just click and you can zoom in to a part of the photo to check its sharpness. And you can see here that this doesn't look sharp. And the reason it doesn't look sharp is because we're looking at it. Hopefully I'm not blocking up here, but we're looking at a teeny weeny part of the photograph. So we're losing all those megapixels. So if I decided, oh, I love this crop and this is actually what I want the photo to be like, I would super resolution this and then do the crop. This one was taken on an iPhone. Okay, but to come back to sharpening, and I know this is a JPEG file, I'm just showing you on so you get an idea. When you slide this slider, you're going to see the edges get more sharp. Hopefully you can see that. I can zoom in more so you can see it. Watch the edge of the flower. You will see that. Look, if I go too far, I bring in noise. It's like the seesaw. Too much sharpening equals increased noise. So again, it's like a bit of a delicate balancing act in terms of how much noise reduction, how much sharpening. General rule of thumb is that I'm going to give you two recommendations here. Remember, I said you need to sharpen every picture. So sometimes we're sharpening a picture that's ISO 100, ISO 64, in this case, ISO 50. For a low ISO image where you haven't had to do any noise reduction, Adobe generally recommends putting the sharpening amount slider to between 30 and 40. And you'll see on some of your photos, when you go down to this, it will automatically be at 40. Because Lightroom's pretty smart and it often picks up that it's a raw file and that it needs to be sharpened, and it will sharpen it just to 40. The best way to think about this amount is imagine just I had like a pot of like magic sharpening dust and I was sprinkling it over my picture. And the more magic sharpening dust I sprinkle over, the sharper my picture is going to be. And here we're just saying I'm going to do it 40 times rather than I'm going to sprinkle it 100 times.
Can you tell Adam has girls?
Oh my God, I was teaching a class yesterday there was someone, I was like referring everything to like Disney princesses and mermaids. My entire life is, I was very proud of myself. Yesterday, I made my first ever friendship bracelet. I can now do beading. I've got good at all these things as a dad that they just don't teach you. Like even like to put up long hair. Like for 40 years, I've never put up long hair. Like so now I've become I can do braids. I've become it's amazing what you can learn.
And it keeps going.
Yeah. So yeah. So sorry for the. I haven't started saying Little Mermaid and Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella, which I was talking about to someone yesterday. I was talking about Alice in Wonderland, and we really went down a rabbit hole. Anyway, so
No pun intended.
yeah, exactly. Sharpening is usually between 30 and 40 for a high ISO picture where you've put some and you can see here. Look when I increase the noise. Look how the petal becomes less sharp. See that? Kind of, especially look at the green one. I lose like all the detail of the green one. And if I go all the way up, you see what I mean? It looks like a fake plant. It looks like it's made of plasticine, which we don't. So for a high ISO image, which I would say on for you guys is anything above 1,000, I would be sharpening somewhere between 50 and 70. You will very, very rarely, if not ever, need to go higher than that. Because if you go higher than that, you're going to create noise. There's noise. There's noise, there's less sharpness. So look, more noise reduction, less sharp. Too much sharpening, more noise. That's the seesaw that I was talking about. And it's nice Adobe give you these numbers because it kind of helps at least benchmark where you should be. That makes sense to everyone so far?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Do you know what's funny? I wasn't planning on teaching you guys any of this today. I had a whole nother class. I had a whole nother class lined up, but we've gone down
Got
this.
one more left.
We've gotten down this rabbit hole. So, and I think this is worthwhile. You all know. It's amazing how it happens like that. It's there's so much to learn that I can take you in lots of different directions. So back here, you'll see there's three other sliders that are important. One says radius, one says detail, one says masking. We'll do them in order. So generally what's happening when you sharpen, when I put my magic sprinkling sharpening dust on a picture, is the computer is looking for edges in your photograph. It's looking for anywhere, and by an edge is really defined by a computer or a camera as an area or a line where there is a difference in light between each side of it. That's how it picks up what a line is, because there's a difference in, to use the photography word, luminosity or luminance, which means brightness, between one part of a line and another part of the line. That's a defined edge. So what it does is it kind of works its way along, let's just say it was this, it works its way along an edge, and these are all the pixels, and it sharpens every pixel. It puts my magic sprinkling dust on the pixel. Now, depending on what you are doing and what you're working with, you can decide how much of this magic sharpening dust veers beyond the edges. Does it stick really tight to the edge and only do here, or does it go a little bit out? An example where you'd want it to go a little bit out would be pretty much anything in nature, because nature doesn't have hard lines. Nature isn't like my glass, where it's a very hard line. Most of the time, lines in nature, whether you're, and that could be a flower, that could be a landscape, that could be an animal, like that could be me. Like my hair is like, I don't have like a hard edge. Like it's textured, it's feathered. So I need to account for that. So for nature stuff, what the radius is basically saying how big is the radius of your pixels that you want sharpened. When you want more sharpened, you tile this up. Again, I'm going to give you some numbers to help you. And you can only go on this to 3. So it's from 0.5 to 3. There's not as many numbers to choose from. When you're dealing with anything with soft edges, and I don't know whether I'll be able to see this here because it's going to be too pixelated. We'll try. Okay. So you can see when I increase the radius, just look at this line in here. Okay. And just watch this when I increase the radius. See how the line gets bigger of the leaf? Can you all see that? That low there. I know it's totally pixelated and it's just squares, but that is what a pixel looks like. Can you see how it's getting bigger, the edge? So the radius is basically saying you're instructing Lightroom, sharpen the edge, but kind of sharpen everything around it as well, which it needs to catch, because in nature everything's soft. So I would generally recommend putting this up to somewhere between 1.5 and 2 for natural things. If I went and photographed a can of Coke or a building or anything with a hard edge, I would be taking this down to 0.5 because I just want the building to be sharp. I don't want it to sharpen the sky next to the building. I want it to just sharpen the nice edges of the building, the windows of the building. And hopefully you can all see that changing there. It becomes like feathered and soft. Higher numbers and lower is a smaller radius. It's going to sharpen less. That makes sense to everyone? Susie, you look like you have a question.
No, I was just trying to figure out what the number was, 0.5.
Oh, yeah, 0.5 for hard edge.
Uh-huh.
And that's usually architectural photography and product photography.
What was the second one? Architectural and what?
Architectural and
Product. Oh, sorry.
Product, like things like
Right.
lying around. Like if I wanted to take a picture of my headphones have a very hard edge. It's not like taking a picture of a rose. It's kind of nice and soft. So generally things that I would put under an umbrella of photography, we want to sharpen with a smaller radius. We want it to hug tight to the lines. We don't want it to feather out much. The third slider detail, and I'm going into quite in depth with you with these because I think while we're here, and then it means we don't have to come back here. Detail is on, and again, hopefully you can see this. You can see the difference. Look at it blurry. Look at it getting more sharp. Now, obviously, I know it's just squares you're looking at, which is fine. In fact, most of the time when I sharpen a picture, I go down to this minutia level, especially if I'm printing it really big. But what the detail does is it works. Remember I said that the majority, well, in fact, entirely how this tool works is around the edges of your pixel. It's all to do with the edges. And it's trying to make the edges nice and hard and sharp and defined. Now your pixels are tiny, so most of the time that gets most of the picture. But inside here, if I go into the theory, it doesn't sharpen, which is fine in most cases. But for something where you have a lot of detail, let's say you photographed a really hairy dog, or a horse's mane, something where there was like hair and detail and lots of, in those instances, or like even to be honest, the petal of a flower has a lot of detail in it. You can use this detail slider, but again with caution. This is usually at 0. And I'm going to give you Adobe's numbers. Adobe generally recommends for stuff with texture and detail that this lives somewhere, this is a bit of a wider range, somewhere between 20 and 50. Again, we don't want to overdo it, because then look at that green leaf getting all these weird like pixels in it. When I overdo it, see the difference? There's like nothing there, and then it has all these like black, like you can actually see, you can do this on your pictures. You can go, I'm looking at 1600%. You can almost see that how it's all tiny.
Look at that.
You see how it's tiny
Look at
little
those
squares?
squares. Wow.
That's basically looking on a pixel by pixel level. And you can see here what's happening with the detail is it's bringing that back, but we got to be careful. We don't want to bring it back too much where we're overdoing it. And usually above 50 is overdoing it. Now, if I zoom out, this looks great. Like you're not looking at it at a pixel, but to get, if you do want to go like how I just went there, the way you have to do it is you have to come to the top left up here, and you have to put this at 1600%. And I really recommend only doing this for something if you're like, I want to print this photo out and I need to print it out as a 60 by 40 inch print. And I want to check that it looks perfect. Otherwise, this is overkill. You don't need to go to this much. But I'm just showing you it's quite cool that you can go here and you can see all the pixels. And then if you come back up to the top left and you hit fit, it's going to go back to seeing the original picture. Zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out. Because my zoom in is now set to 1600%. If I change it and I put it at 100% and then I do zoom in, when I zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, it's only going to zoom me in and out to 100%. So it's like, how strong is my magnifying glass? You can think of it as. Okay. So we've added sharpening to this picture. The problem is we've put it everywhere. We've like taken our magic sharpening dust and we've covered the whole picture, which sometimes you want to do if you had a picture and all of these are slightly blurry because you've used slow shutter speeds. These are bad examples, but let's try and use this. If you had a picture where, I'll just add some sharpening to it. Okay. In this instance, let's say for this picture, maybe I want to sharpen the grass and the beach, but I don't want to sharpen the sky because there's nothing in the sky, especially when you have blue sky. This happens a lot. There's no lines. There are some lines in this sky, but a lot of the time there may be areas of your photo where you don't want the sharpening dust to go. Another really good example is just a shallow depth of field picture. Like if you have a picture, and let's see if I can find one from one of our classes. Okay, so like a picture like this, I don't want to sharpen the background because it's blurry on purpose. I've made it blurry. I don't want to sharpen it. I want to sharpen the flower, but I don't want to sharpen the background. And this is where this last tool, masking, comes in. Now, when you slide this, it appears that nothing is happening. But if you hold, depending, Option or Control on your keyboard, Option for those of you on a Mac, Control for those of you on a PC. When I hold my finger down on Option and I click on this slider, everything goes white. Now, you may remember from a previous class that I've taught you that when it comes to masking in photography, and the term masking just means the ability to edit a certain part of the picture rather than the whole thing, is Adobe uses white and black a lot. And there's that phrase I taught you way back that says white reveals, black conceals. And this is really relevant here. So what this is showing me when I hit Option and I just click on this is showing me that the white is revealing everywhere where I've put my sharpening dust, which in this picture we don't want. I don't want to sharpen the background because I've got this lovely blur. So when you hit Option and you click on this, as you slide it to the right, you're going to see this happening. Remember, white reveals, black conceals. So where the white lines are is showing me where my sharpening is happening. Everywhere that is black, no sharpening is being applied. Now for this one, there's no golden number or even sets of numbers. It totally depends on the photo you're working on. But what you don't want is to make it like that, because that basically means now there's no sharpening. So you want to find a happy medium place where your subject has those, you can see the flower has, especially the top one, has those solid white lines around it. They're like glowing white lines. And you can see the top flower has it much more than the bottom flower because the top flower is much more in focus, and Lightroom knows that. So I want to slide this from here until I reach a happy point where just the main subject, in this case, the top flower, white reveals, black conceals. My sharpening dust is going most strongly at the most intensity on that top flower. And then when you let go, you go back to your photo. Now that masking and sharpening thing you should be doing on pretty much every photo in Lightroom, if you've taken it as a raw. And usually it's the final thing we do before we hit export. If I was to make a flow chart of like everything I did to a photo from import to rate to edit, the last step would be sharpen, then export. And that's why it's down here, right here, down at the bottom. Like Adobe Lightroom puts it all the way down here because this is, they kind of want you to work through this chronologically from top to bottom in an order. And then the final thing you hit, or one of the final things you hit, is sharpening.
But if you've done noise reduction, you're supposed to sharpen it after noise reduction,
Good.
right?
Really good. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
But if you're just working on a normal raw file,
Okay.
like and a slow shutter speed picture that you've taken for me and you took it in raw, theoretically, if I'm teaching you like about the letter of the law, every raw file should be sharpened before it comes out of Lightroom. Because the edges, by its very definition, by shooting a raw file, are not sharp. Did you guys know that?
I'm not sure that I do that. I will now.
When you get in the habit of doing that, it's an easy tool to use, and especially this masking one, holding Option, really helps you refine it. I'll show you on another photo. Let's just let's look at like these, for example. This is from the last class. But if I sharpen a little bit and then I Option, and then I just want my spikes to be sharp. I don't care about the background. You can see it's all black, and I'd stop it about there. And already those spikes look much better. They look much sharper.
Huh. It's magical.
And
It's great.
That's pretty cool. Especially when you combine this with the other things that I just showed you, the super resolution and the denoise. You can use
it's
one or the other.
interesting
Sorry,
on
Joanne.
that one that the background between the pointed area and the how not sharp that is, the edges of the cactus in the back.
Yeah. And it's because
What was it taken at? Let's see.
I
I don't,
f13, but it was at a relatively big focal length. But when I sharpen it, Lightroom is really smart. And you can see if you look in this area here, okay, compared to the spikes, Lightroom knows that there's not, remember, Lightroom works by looking for lines, by looking for differences in light. And if I was a little megapixel here and then I was another little megapixel here, there's not much difference in light between those 2 megapixels. Whereas there is a big difference in light between this black one and the green next to it. That's what it tries to find. It tries to find those edges, which means when I go like this, if you look beyond the spikes, beyond the spikes, that very quickly goes black, but leaves the spikes bright white.
fascinating.
Yeah. And it's all to do with it looking for an edge, looking for a difference in luminosity, in light. And once you've done that, when you go to, and remember that should be the last thing you do, when you go to edit, when you go to export it, you'll see down here, one of the boxes that you can check is this sharpen for screen. I want you to uncheck that and then export the photo. Because you've already done the sharpen and you don't want the computer to do it for you. So if the computer does it for us, it's just going to sharpen it more and then it's going to cause noise reduction. And then it's going to make the photo just have more noise in it. Okay, does that all make sense to everyone? That's quite technical what I just showed you there. That you can go back and watch the recording. But I just essentially took you through an umbrella and a myriad of tools that let you crop in on your picture aggressively, remove noise from a picture, potentially blow something up larger, take an older picture and make it into a raw. And then with those subsequent pictures, sharpen them up. It's cool, right? Really cool.
Very
Yeah.
cool.
Very
That's very helpful.
Yeah, it's a and it's not once you get your head around it, it's not that intimidating. The thing you've just got to remember is when you do an enhance on a picture. So these are actually all of your guys' pictures. So when I do an enhance on a picture, and I'll just pick a random one. Let's just say the piano keys. So look, this was a JPEG. This was taken on an iPhone. When I enhance it and I go super resolution, I'm straight away transforming this from being a JPEG to a RAW in the matter of a couple of milliseconds, although obviously now it's disappeared on me. Where'd it go?
How did you do that? You just hit,
Yeah, and do a JPEG and enhance it right away, the first thing.
Yeah. So look, so here's a JPEG. I've got and it's not, I need to find it in a collection. Hold on one sec. Let me just, what was that one under? Let's just go here. Okay. So here's a JPEG. Imagine this was a photo taken 5 years ago and we took it as a JPEG, my mistake. We right click, we enhance, we make sure super resolution is checked, and then we hit enhance. Okay. And now it's an enhanced -sr.dng. This is now a raw file. This means if I wanted to go and play with the colors or do something with this and say, oh, I want the blue to be more saturated, or I want the blue to be brighter, I've got just so much more to work with.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And then if I was happy and I sharpened it, I go like my amount, like 40, let's say 40. This one has a hard edge. This is not a soft edge. It's like photographing a building. This is a thing. So I would take the radius down to 0.5. And then I would hold option and I would go to about there, where the fender and the window and the bubbles are all sharp, but the bit on the far left is basically not being sharpened at all. Because if you look, there's no detail in there. I don't need this bit sharpened. If I over sharpen it, I'm just going to create noise. I stop about that. And look how sharp that looks, considering it was taken on an iPhone and it was a JPEG.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. Really, really cool. I mean, this honestly is like a revolutionary tool
Mhm.
for most people because it's suddenly opened up such a big Pandora's box of creative capabilities on photos that people thought they couldn't use. And even on a photo that if you went out and took a photo tomorrow, I've basically made your camera from like a $5 grand camera to a 20 grand camera using one tool. And this is like where AI has been very effective in helping photography and photo editing and workflow. Anyone got any questions on that?
Wow.
Okay, cool. So, hour and a half flew by there. Let's spend the last half an hour looking at our pictures. Come back to the original photos. So again, here you can see, look, there's the JPEG. Look at the difference. Look how more crit. In fact, I'll put them up next to each other. Remember to put them up next to each other. You just hit C. Can you all see how the one on the right just looks like you're seeing way more light? Look at the suns. Look at the sunset, the purple at the top. Look at that yellow
Yeah.
path. Look at the greens, like in the reeds. It just feels like I've brightened the whole thing. I haven't.
Amazing.
Look at the difference here.
Mhm.
It's here. Difference here. All we're doing is by going, I'll draw a little diagram here, which will help explain it, is by going from JPEG to DNG, is we are increasing dynamic range. And that's why you're seeing more light.
That's
That's why you're
fast.
seeing more contrast. And that's why you're seeing more color. So you may end up doing this on loads of photos. There's nothing wrong with that. And as I showed you, you can batch edit. So you can do it on 100, go and make yourself a cup of coffee and come back, and you'll have a new version of each one of those 100 pictures. So let's say you went on a great trip to Yosemite, and you're like, oh yeah, I'd love to enhance all of these. You can just do it all in one go.
And then do you just throw away the originals?
Yeah, I just throw them away. Well, you don't need them. Because then you've just got a double and it's taking up. Well, you've got one and you've got one that's 4 times the size. So there's no need to have the originals yet. I would delete them. And I'd make sure I deleted them from disk, not just remove them. I mean, some people like the insurance policy of keeping them. There's no downside to that, but I don't want you to get confused and imagine we were looking at all your pictures here. I don't want, let me get the grid back up. We were looking at all your pictures here. If you were looking at your Lightroom and you had double of everything, that can become really confusing. Now, actually, one thing that I didn't show you that reminds me of, Susie, is rather than to avoid a situation like this with Nancy's photo, let's just enhance this one. Right click, enhance. There's a box you can check here that says create stack.
Hmm.
And again, that's kind of a lesson in itself, and I'm not going to go too far down the rabbit hole of stacks in Lightroom. But essentially what it will do is it will think of it like a stack of pancakes, and you can only see the top pancake because you're looking down on the pancakes. It will put the old photo underneath and it will put the new photo on top. So essentially hide the old photo. Watch, you'll see.
Why would you want to do that?
Because some people find it really distracting having like what we've got where you've got like, so here's the 2 different options. You've got where they sit next to each other. And this one, this is the new one. And there's now like a little 2 there. That shows me that there's another photo. There's actually 2 photos in this square. There's one hiding underneath, which is the original.
Then you
That's,
just have to remember to go back and delete the other ones. It's
yeah,
easier.
or people keep it there.
Yeah.
So, because like I can open it, I can like unstack it. There it is, or I can put it back in its little stack. So lots of people like doing this for organization. Nancy is the main reason they're worried they don't want to delete the raw. They want to keep both
Okay.
files, but they don't want to have two, 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 two. Instead, they just want to have seeing the fresh one, the DNG, and the old one lives underneath it. So, and sometimes Lightroom stacks photos for you automatically without you even realizing. So if ever you're looking at one of your photos and you see a 2 or a 3 or a 4 or a 5, that's Lightroom has created a stack. And
So
there's
how did you unstack that?
good question. Sorry, I did that quickly without even explaining it. So you just take the number up here
Mhm.
and you just double click on it.
Oh, okay.
And then look, and it says photo is part of a stack, 1 of 2. And if I want to restack it back again, I just go on the number and I double left click. Sorry, single left click actually. Just single left click and it will put it back as a stack. I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just showing you both options. It's whatever works best for you. But a lot of people like the stacking because it keeps things a little bit neater. Especially imagine we'd batch edited 100 of these and we'd super resolution them. You'd have technically 200 pictures in your collection and they'd all be sitting side by side. And the nice thing about the stack is it removes the ambiguity, especially Susie, if someone doesn't delete their stuff, of which one was the enhanced one, which one was the original, which on this one, I have to go and look and I'm like, oh, that was the enhanced one. That was the original one. I don't want to make a mistake and start editing this one and then realize, oops, I'm on the wrong one. Whereas the stack only shows you the top one. Okay. How many of you have ever used stacks in Lightroom before?
Never.
Never.
Okay, good. So that feels like a lesson in itself because that's a whole another genre. What
But
you
I
can
think we need the post-production lesson if we're going to have all these extra photos that, even.
maybe our next lesson I'll do on on digital format. The only problem with that, Susie, that's a bit tricky in a group setting is everyone's computer is set up slightly differently.
Right.
So I can give you like general recommendations and a general process, which is what I'll do. But every one of you, your raw pictures are going to be living in a slightly different place. Your Lightroom catalog backup is going to be, some of you are doing Time Machine, some of you aren't doing Time Machine. Nancy's on a PC, you guys are on like Macs. So I always caveat that lesson and say, I'm going to give you like a general workflow, but you're each going to have specific issues or things that you'll have to address depending on how you've got your system set up. And I often, sometimes, well, not sometimes, the whole time people call me, I'm like, like those people who they call to like clean up their pantry. People call people to clean up pantries and they're like, or clean out their closet, clean out their closet. I'm like that person for digital photography. I often get the call from people and I hop on and I look at their computers and we do some one-on-one class, and in an hour or 2 hours, I can have the whole thing cleaned up. But it's very individualized because your closet will look different to Nancy's closet, to Charlie's closet, to Joanne's closet. But I can say in general, we'll put them all in color coordinate them and make all the clothes look nice. Again, extending the metaphor, but everyone's closet's going to be different. So yeah, I think it's a good idea, Susie, though. I think we should definitely do that. And then if any of you have more questions, then I can always help you we can jump on and just do a one-on-one to really get you have a tight workflow, because you're all taking a lot of pictures and you should all really have a very efficient, safe and reliable way of backing all of that stuff up.
And there's so many options out there.
There are so many options.
Overwhelming. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of options. So yeah, well, I'll talk you through my recommendations next time. And so that would be a good lesson. Right. Before we run out of time, let's look at slow shutter speeds. Okay. Let's just spend a little time sitting back, relaxing, and then looking at some pretty pictures. So this is Nancy's 30 seconds. Where were you, Nancy, when you took this picture?
Cape Cod.
Very nice. So look at the movement in the clouds, look at the movement of like the bulrushes. This is Nancy has specifically, nice job, Nancy, chosen to use a slower shutter speed to add some mystique to this photo. And she could have taken this at 1/125. Still would have got the pretty colors, still would have got the composition, but you wouldn't have got the feeling of movement as much as you do here. Now, Nancy, I think these are birds.
Those are birds.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think they're birds, but I'd probably take those
Take
out.
those out.
Yeah, just because they almost look like sensor spots here. And I think this
Yeah.
would be a lot cleaner, especially because they're in the white area. They really stand out. So that they almost look silhouetted across the white. And I think, Nancy, you could very easily do that using this remove tool. Remember that?
I actually did take several out, but
So you could just work your way through these and just remove them. And there. Oops, I just hit delete by mistake. Sorry. There they are. They're not in there anymore. But I think that would look like, but really nice shot. Really, really nice shot. Well done for using f/22. Nice. Very common combination for landscape photographers is slow shutter speed, high f number, low ISO. And look even at Nancy's histogram here. It's almost like textbook. That bell curve is what we always aiming to get. This is really that shape there. This is excellent. Very, very good. Nice job.
Yep.
Look at this one. This one's really interesting. Got some movement here. 5 seconds. You can see f/18 again. Zoom lens. Now, I don't know if who is this one of your guys? Someone here?
Mine.
Oh, Charlie. So
I was at
Joanne,
the
hold on,
bridge.
hold on. Don't give it away. I'm gonna ask Joanne, how do you think Charlie got this effect? What do you think she's done?
I think she zoomed it. Or something's moving toward her.
Yeah, Charlie, go on. Tell her what you did.
I was on a bridge. It was over a freeway with the
Cars.
sunset in the background of the lights of the city. And I just
Oh.
twisted the lens back and forth.
Yeah, you twisted
Quick.
the lens, right? You zoomed
Yeah.
in, you zoomed in and zoomed out. So that
Yeah.
zooming in and zooming out during that 5 seconds, Joanne, you got it, gives you those like lines that look like they're exploding in or exploding out and can create so you can kind of see it. I think this is the buildings in the background, Charlie. You can kind of see
Yeah.
the silhouettes of the buildings, but you create something really interesting and abstract. I'd probably crop out some of this stuff at the bottom. I'd almost be tempted to like put this more like that.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's
I think it needs so much negative space. I think that's a bit of a better crop to draw you towards it. But really nice, really good job of being, even this, I think this is, I'm not sure. I think that's a car, brake lights. I don't know if
Yeah.
there's a freeway down there. It could be a boat. I don't know where you are. Oh, and you can kind of see the road. There's the road.
Yeah.
there's the white line there.
Yeah, but really good, Charlie. Excellent. Very, very creative. Nice use of slow shutter speed. Let's look at this one. This one's really cool. Showing movement over time. Now, the common way that people do this is they freeze the rowers. But this is just as effective. Arguably, this is more artistic. It's more creative. I love the parallel, the strong parallel lines here. These strong, like these lines. They kind of tie the whole thing together. You kind of feel like you're really moving with the rowers. And the nice thing about using a slow shutter speed like this is it makes you appreciate the movement. They look like they're rowing fast. They may not have been, but they probably were because this was taken only at 1/10 of a second. But you see this a lot. Sports photographers use this a lot. We blur the athlete slightly because it makes the athlete look like they're moving quicker than they actually are. And the same is true here of the rower. This is a really good composition. I like even the color of the color of the boat and the color of the side of the river. Really nicely tie in with each other. I think this is at some type of regatta or rowing race. Is this one of yours? Someone here? Maybe someone.
It's mine, Joanne.
Yeah, really.
I live on the Montlake Cut, and the crew races end in our backyard when there are crew races. So I just happened to see there were a couple of boats going by in a smaller race, but
Yeah, it's excellent.
sometimes they're really big ones. They're right next to the Husky Stadium or Husky UW.
Amazing. So I know where to go when I want to go and watch a game there.
Yeah, no problem.
So yeah, this is really, really, really good, really nice. In fact, I'm actually going to I'm going to do all your rowing pictures because we had a few, and and then we'll come back. Look at this one.
Oh, wow.
Wild.
Yeah, but it's really cool. This one's a little bit fast shut, but look what it's done to the water. Look at the movement. Look at all that texture there. Now,
That is so cool.
yeah, it's really cool. Joanne, I would probably take out that.
Yeah.
Oh, mhm.
I think it would be cleaner without the other boat. But this really looks like a work of art. Like my job, right, is to make your photos stand out from the crowd. That's my job. And a photo like this straight away is an eye catcher. It's
Adam, would you take that yellow boat out with the what's it called? The not the Band-Aid, but the remove
a
tool
removed.
in Lightroom?
Yeah, but it made yeah, we're probably doing an okay job. If this was my picture, I'd probably take it into Photoshop.
Okay.
And I'd use because the remove tool is still not great here. I'll show you.
Yeah.
I would use the regenerative fill. I'm not going to go over that because I've shown it to you.
Right, yeah.
You see, this is not bad.
Yeah.
You have other choices too sometimes.
But it's not perfect.
What would
Yeah.
you use in Photoshop? You don't have to go there. I'm just curious.
It's the one where you lasso around it and then you use
Yeah.
the regenerative fill.
Okay.
I've covered that. You can go back and look at it in a previous
Yeah.
class. But really, really nice. And then look at Joanne's other one here, which like really to look at.
Oh, wow.
This looks like Joanne. There's a type of lens called a tilt shift lens, which makes, and you get this a lot with motion blur. It plays around with scale. It almost looks like these are toy people that you've put in a boat.
The other thing what I was doing, I was excited about it. So I think not only was I doing a slow shutter speed, not necessarily that slow, but I was moving with
Moving
the
your hand
boats
at the
because
same time.
but I didn't know if that was right or wrong.
No,
But
that's
I
right.
kept following the boat, so
That is
they were coming toward me.
that is a type of intentional camera movement that we've practiced,
Mhm.
ICM, called panning, which is when you use a slow shutter speed and you follow the subject. And it's intentionally slowing the shutter speed down to see the movement. I couldn't help when I looked at this one, Joanna. This guy with the funny red hat caught my attention. Oh, it could be a girl. Actually, it's a girl. But yeah, they're all wearing like interesting crowns, and they look
They
like.
had weird outfits, some of them.
Um, but really, really interesting. Great use of slow shutter speed. Nice job. Very nice job.
Thank you.
Let's look at this one.
Mm.
Also very pretty. Now, what's interesting is most of you took the idea of slow shutter speed and you combined it with intentional camera movement with ICM, because we talked about that on a previous class, which is really encouraging for me because we're adding all the different building blocks that go into making strong photography. This, you can see, to get us down to that slow shutter speed, we had to increase the F number to 16. And you've got a really beautiful, interesting picture of this plant, which I think is just a plant next to the siding of a house. You can see the house behind
It's a beautiful camellia in bloom right now.
Yeah, it's stunning. But you could just as easily take a picture and have the camellia sharp.
Mm.
Arguably, this creates something abstract, interesting, eye-catching, and it's just the movement of your hand combined with the slow shutter speed. Look at this one. Stunning. Great filter frame picture. You guys have really advanced as a group, like you four who are here and everyone else on the recording. The quality of the imagery is excellent that I'm seeing now. Like I always find something to critique because that's my job. But when it's hard for me to find something to critique and it gets harder and harder, then I know I'm doing my job correctly. And this one looks great. Really very, very good. Look at the shutter speed again and look at the F number. Filling the frame with these, I love the yellows, kind of flow of color here. The purples and the greens are complementary colors on the color palette. So they complement and work with each other to provide balance and a very, very good use of a slow shutter speed. Look at this one. This one kind of looks like fish swimming in the ocean. Tadpoles.
They were lily pads.
There we go. So yeah, I was going to say, I don't even know. but it kind of looks like loads of fish, like a school of fish swimming from like left to right in the frame.
Mhm.
See all the fish? Like here's all the but it's but really, really nice. Again, most of you can see the shutter speeds are tending to be somewhere from like a tenth of a second to like 2 seconds. Apart from Nancy's first one we saw, which was the landscape one. Nancy, I'd probably again on this
Crop
one,
more.
yeah, I'd probably just crop a little bit more. I'd maybe even just like bring up to like here. Just
Mm.
I'd even think about on this one about what happens when we rotate it. So it feels,
It.
yeah, it feels like it's growing.
Like a waterfall.
Yes.
Like that's like totally abstract art, or even feels like it almost looks like asparagus is like growing up
Yes.
into the frame. But really, really good, really, really very good. But I would crop it just a little bit more.
Okay.
With those rows. This one, I think, Charlie, was this your one you sent me?
It was.
Yeah. So I
It
think
was,
were you trying to
kind of
get
bombed.
were you trying to get the water?
Yeah,
So
but I only had my iPhone, so
the way to do it with your iPhone is you make sure you take a live photo. So you turn the
Oh.
turn the live on, which is the one with the circle on it.
yeah.
Then you take the picture and then go and review the picture. And on the top left up here, there'll be a little drop down menu. This will say live. And
Yeah.
one of your options will be long exposure.
Oh,
Oh,
And what this will do is this will recreate a slow shutter speed. And anything that's moved during this time, it will blur the water.
oh,
Hmm.
wow.
Yeah, you can play with it.
That's
Yeah, it's really cool. So you
That's
take
a
it.
new one.
That is a new one. And again, I wish I had more time to dive into that, but have a play with it. And if you guys have any questions, you can let me know next time we speak. I want to make sure I get through everyone's photos. But I see what you were trying to do here, Charlie. But
Yep.
yes, the problem is because you can't control the shutter speed on an iPhone,
Yep.
it's almost impossible to slow it down to get that. But the live one is a way around that.
where is the live on it though?
It's
On
a
the
circle
it's
with,
a circle on when you go to take a picture
Oh, okay.
on the top. Let me tell you,
right,
on the top
usually.
right, and it's going to have a circle with a line through it.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
If you get
Oh,
a line and then you take a picture of something moving, or you can try doing intentional camera movement in this. You can move your iPhone
mm-hmm.
and then go and change it to long exposure, and you'll see a blurry picture, which kind of looks like Nancy's lily pads.
Mm-hmm.
This one, really nice. It's got a lovely stillness to it. Now this one's got a lot. I should have actually used this one. As this one, Nancy has. Is this yours, Nancy?
Yes.
Quite a bit of noise because you combined slow shutter speed and high ISO. So this would be a good one to go back and practice
Go back.
all the stuff we've covered today on noise reduction and sharpening to reduce some of this noise in the water.
Okay.
Because slow shutter speeds, by the way, guys, also cause noise because you're opening up the camera for a prolonged period of time and you're giving the little electrons more time to buzz around, more time to hit against each other, and more time to create heat. That's digital noise. But other than that, Nancy, really nice. Look at these. Oh yeah, I'm doing well. Here we go. Put these two together. In fact, we'll look at them one at a time so we can see the settings. So this one, to me, is a bit of a halfway house. It's like we didn't quite go slow enough to get the water looking silky smooth, but we didn't go fast enough to freeze it.
Mm-hmm.
We're a bit in no man's land. I'm not sure what you were trying to do here with the water. Now, obviously, you're seeing some of the motion, but I think we could have pushed the shutter speed much slower here. This one's much slower to mean that we can see more of that motion. Look at it going over the rock there. How cool that looks. And generally, to really photograph waterfalls, you want to be somewhere between like a 20th of a second and 1 to 2 seconds. That's like the sweet spot, depending on how fast the water's moving. That's a 20th, which is going from fast to slow, which is 1 to 2 seconds, in order to be able to see the movement. But this is really good. Nice job whoever took this. I know I'm racing through these, sorry, just because I want to make sure I cover everyone's pictures. Um, both, look at this one, 0.5 seconds, and this one, 2 seconds. Totally abstract, intentional camera. Now, this one like this, I'd probably crop in. I don't like the little hole of light there. I'd probably find something, or I'd use that to my advantage and kind of go up like that. So I feel like I'm kind of growing up until it kind of looks like a dragon. Going into the top right of the frame, you could also even probably move it a little bit more that way, like that. Now I have no idea now, is that a splash of water? Is it waves? Is it like you're creating something, especially if you go in on an intentional camera movement, by default, they're going to look a little bit hazy. This is a good little hack. Just increase the dehaze a little bit, vibrancy in the texture, and look at the difference. Just makes all the colors stand out more.
That was still the lily pads.
Yeah, it's great. It's really good. Where were these lily pads, Nancy?
Grand Tetons. And everybody kept, we're on a bridge and everybody kept saying, are you seeing bears?
Very nice. Very, very nice. This one's really nice as well. I love that. This one really, this one looks like a painting. So much texture in it. It's lovely. I'd probably crop out a little bit. But this is really, really good use of slow shutter speed. It's the total opposite of what we were looking at last week, which was the fruit dropping into the water. I'm trying to push you guys on purpose beyond the boundaries of what you would normally shoot. Which means when you approach a beautiful flower like Joanne's camellia, you're like, I can shoot this in macro mode and I can shoot it close. I can use a fast shutter speed. I can move around it. Or maybe I'm going to blur it to create something interesting. In all honesty, I probably want you to do all of them and then choose which one you like. And this is a super simple picture, but really shows shutter speed well. In that 80th of a second, the car has gone past. If we would have slowed the shutter speed down, do you think the car would have been more blurry or less blurry?
More.
Yeah, even more blurry. You got it.
More blurry. Yeah.
But at this one, it's like it's blurred enough that we can see the movement, but it's not just like a streak of light. But look at the road and the hillside behind it. It's totally sharp because that has not moved during the time. Okay. So anyone got, oh, actually, I think we got one. Sorry, Joanne, I didn't see this one. These boat ones are great. This one again, I'd probably be tempted to take out the grass. I don't think only because I think the color's a bit distracting and I kind of like the blue and the orange just together. Even on these ones, Joanne, I wonder what it would look like if you flip it.
There were 4 people in that boat.
Really?
Kidding. It was really close, right under me.
Now it kind of looks like a side of a building or something. And I mean,
I don't.
oh, like it's really interesting with like a surfboard stuck on it. But as you can see from everyone's pictures here, everyone who sent me pictures really were nice job on taking advantage of shutter speed to create something that is much more creative. Anyone got any questions? Okay.
Really good class. So
Yes.
good information.
Fun
Like,
assignment
I
too.
also want to be led by you guys. Do you think I'm giving you too much information in each class?
No.
No.
Good, because I don't want to overwhelm you. And the nice thing is you always have the recording, so you can go back and watch. If there's something that you're not sure on, you can find it in your own time. Okay, so here's the so next time, Susie, I think you're right. I think we'll focus quite a bit of the class on digital file management.
Good.
If the appetite is there for that, which it sounds like it is,
Mhm.
and that's a little bit more advanced. And I think for our next theme, okay, I'm going to be super generic, and super vague on purpose, because I want you to use slow shutter speeds. I want you to use fast shutter speeds. I want you to play around with intentional camera movement. I want you to go and redo that strawberry dropping into the water if you want to redo that. I'm just going to give you the theme of moments.
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 Yeah. Interpret it as you will.
What's the date for the next?
Good question.
Wednesday the 16th.
Yeah.
And
Thank you, Nancy.
And you want to go 9 or 9:15?
If we can do 9, that would be great if that works for everyone.
Sure.
For Seattle women, we all supposedly have the Tacoma meeting that day.
Oh,
So, which I just discovered, but I plan on not going because I want to stay for this.
I'm not
Yeah.
going either.
Yeah, I can't move. I was just seeing even if I could move it
No.
for you guys, but I don't
No.
have any other availability that week.
That's,
So
I'm
let's
not, I'm planning on showing up for class.
Me too.
perfect. And then we've got one the following Wednesday as well, the 23rd.
Ah,
Okay, what time? 9 o'clock?
Yeah. I
so
believe
we're
will-
back to,
I
I
believe
won't be here.
I believe we've got one. Nancy, have you got that one in the
Well,
calendar?
you
have it.
only had 5 classes, so maybe that's the one that is missing.
oh, but and that the 23rd, a lot of us are going to be in California for a flower show judging.
Well, hold on, I've got to go back.
No.
How many classes have we done? So I've lost track. How many do
5.
I need to go?
Well, next week is 5.
Next week is 5. And I think this was a block of 6. If I'm not correct, but maybe I'm wrong. I have to go and check. I can't remember. I have so many different groups. I need to go back and check my notes.
Yeah, I will be in San Francisco on the 23rd. So
Okay,
will
well,
you?
I'm-
Which
Oh,
show are you judging?
The
I'm not
Hillsborough.
entered, so it doesn't matter.
Hillsborough.